Kia ora, good evening. Welcome to one more session called Night New Zealand. And tonight we have a special guest, Jorge Arteiro. How are you?
Hey Marcel, how are you? Yeah, nice to be here again and to talk about .NET Aspire on Kubernetes. And if you
Yep,
people follow the .NET Aspire conference, .NET conference last week, was so amazing, so many amazing talks.
there are lots
Yeah,
of great news. Yeah, on .NET Conf. I was following very close on that one. As usual, like you always come like every year, like to share like something with us. I'm really excited for the session tonight. And you're talking like about running .NET Aspire 9 on Kubernetes from development to production. Are you planning to show us like how to go to production with like
yeah.
containers?
Last week at .NET Conf, I had like a less than 30 minutes to do it. I had to remove some parts from my presentation. And the production is there, but I didn't have time to show. Then we can maybe now have more time. Then we can go deeper from last week and show more details. And if there's anyone live that want to ask questions, put your questions on the chat. If you're not following the channel, this is an amazing channel. There's so much content on this meetup channel as well. But the idea is going a little bit deeper from what I did last week. If you missed last week, that's fine. You can watch later. And I'm going to talk about most of the things as well, and maybe show a little bit more tricks in more details as
Awesome.
well.
Yeah. Well, I always love like your when you come and share with us like here the user group. Yeah, I'm excited for tonight. I can say that, right?
Thanks for
Uh,
having me again, and I'm pretty sure that if you are following, you're going to learn something very you know we my job now is not like .NET. I'm not doing .NET anymore. I used to be full .NET developer for many years, but last few years I moved with cloud native, more Kubernetes, and how can we bring that experience? And now I'm very excited with .NET Aspire. At the beginning, to be honest, I wasn't that excited with .NET Aspire, but the last few months or since the beginning, the things are really going very well. The community is engaging, and the partners are coming, the new integrations, and that's become something very interesting now. .NET Aspire 9 now bring more flexibility. I even haven't played with all the new features because so many new options now. That let's see how. I have the .NET News open here, the page that we can discuss some new features and why they created that.
yeah. Well, we're going to explore that. I think like before we jump to that, George,
Sure.
and just introduce the user group to those that are jumping here like for the first time, right? So if you don't know, like us, we're Coding 9 New Zealand. We're a community group of developers. We love coding and we follow best practices on software development languages and technologies. In general, mainly focused on the Microsoft stack, but we're open to all technologies, right? And we have a purpose, right? So the intent of the user group is to enable developers with practical knowledge to excel and launch their careers, right? So you're always going to find really great content in here, like in our user group. Uh, I would say that we have, well, we're part of azuretar.com, right? And we have the father of Azuretar here, like with us, Jorge Arteiro. Yeah.
True.
Eh, well, maybe we can just talk like a little bit of Azuretar, just like few words, a phrase about that.
Yeah, Azure Thai is a community that I created, beginning of COVID on YouTube, but the Azure Thai on Twitter was for a long time. But the idea was to help new, content creators, new speakers to get started. And we end up having a lot of, people where English is a second language. And we help them to just create the content, share the knowledge with others. And now we have 150, 60 videos or so. over these last 4 years and 4.5 years. And that's the idea. If you never create the content, I'm pretty sure that you can share something with the community. Or if you are even an engineer manager and you don't have too much, opportunity to share something, we have a channel where you can join us, like a meetup here. We have a Azure tab where you can share your content as well. When we don't do live, we do recorded. Then I can also help you on the public speaking side, give you some tips, help you to put the content together and become more like a public speaking mentoring as well in some way.
Well, that's pretty good. In general, like just do like a succinct explanation, just to get people like curious about it. But awesome. So we
Yeah.
have like the father of Azure Tar here with us. We're also sponsored by .NETFoundation.org, which is the entity that looks after the different open source .NET projects, and JetBrains, right, software tooling for developers. And they very recent became a sponsor of .NET Foundation, right? So you have like access to non-commercial licenses, which is pretty good. So have a look at that. With no further ado, Jorge, I'm gonna bring your screen here, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Let me bring. Here we go.
Yeah, that's let me just open a little bit more here the screen. And the idea is that's my session from last week. And I just put at the end here to production, local Kubernetes cluster, and just let's move that to production. If you want to follow me, like you said, the Azure Tower on YouTube, also the same on Twitter. I have both as well, and on LinkedIn. So I'm a cloud developer advocate specifically for Kubernetes, for cloud native, or the open source projects on CNCF, the Cloud Native Compute Foundation. And when .NET Aspire came, we, at the beginning it wasn't, nobody was talking about Kubernetes. And now we say, how can we develop your .NET application locally with .NET Aspire? And if you never heard about .NET Aspire, I'm going to give you soon like a brief overview of what .NET Aspire is. But how can I develop locally with .NET Aspire, but also can test on Kubernetes locally? And once everything is okay, we can move that to production. And even further, how can we debug on Kubernetes? It's something that a lot of people ask, how can I do my debugging if I start moving my microservice to Kubernetes and I have front end and back end, and the back end is running on Kubernetes? I just want to debug that back end that's running on Kubernetes already. Okay, how that works. And that's the whole idea of this talk, is having that local against production, that would be Azure Kubernetes Service in my case. The local Kubernetes, you're going to use something called kind. That's a way to create a cluster. Then we're going to use, we have a demo just to create the cluster. All my local development tools, WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux, Headlamp, all the tools that I'm going to show for you. And then we're going to generate the Kubernetes YAML files, the manifest. That's the only way to deploy things on Kubernetes, is with YAML file, even if you want to avoid, but we're going to generate that to have the minimal effort to create those YAML files. So we don't want to be, mainly dealing with YAML files, but there is no other way. Kubernetes is about YAML files. And then we deploy for this local kind cluster. That's a full Kubernetes cluster, but locally with a single node, single cluster node. And then we do debugging. And the bonus will be, let's see how that works in production on Azure Kubernetes Service. And then for locally, to work with Kubernetes locally, you can use a few options. I'm going to use kind, but you can use K3D, that's Kubernetes on Docker. You can use Docker desktop cluster. You can use Brancher desktop. There's so many options that you can use. I'm going to focus on kind, that's natively on the Kubernetes project. And you can watch the session from last week. It's on the .NET channel, by the way, my session from last week, and already got like 2,000 views from that in 5 days that was published. It was a very good number. Means that people are interested to learn how to work with .NET Aspire on Kubernetes. Um, I was very surprised with amount of views in only 4 or 5 days, and that means that people are really interested to learn that. And the main things on those, to talk to Kubernetes, we have to talk with this control plane here. When you create a cluster on Azure Kubernetes Service, you have to talk with an API 7. You normally talk with, kubectl is a command line tool. I call kubectl. That's the way that we call. But you normally talk with this API 7. That's the only way, through like a command line tool. And you deploy things on these clusters on the right that could be multiple physical nodes that on Azure Kubernetes Service, pretty much you don't have to maintain those nodes anymore. We have a fully managed cluster that we provide on Azure Kubernetes Service. But locally, we have to create those things. Okay, and there is a way to combine these in a single node where we can use kind to create this cluster, and you're going to be able to talk with this API 7. And when we talk with this API 7 on Kubernetes, we have to send then YAML definitions of those main resource on Kubernetes. That's the namespace or isolation, deployment to deploy your application, and then every time that you deploy, a deployment creates a replica set that manages a specific version of your application. Let's say when you deploy version 1 and you create that deployment, they're going to create a replica set for version 1. If you redeploy the deployment with the same name with a different configuration, they're going to create a version 2, a different replica set. Once everything will be moved to the version 2, the version 1 will be deleted. But there is different strategy when you do a deployment. Deployment of Kubernetes could be a rolling deployment. Means that once the version 2 will be ready, all the traffic is going to version 2 until the version 1 complete finishing processing all the users that are running there. But you can set that different strategies when you create a deployment. And the replica set to run your application, they don't create a container. Kubernetes, they create what you call pods. That's a single unit. That's where your application runs. And one pod can have multiple containers. Then that's very common for us to have a sidecar containers to do things like SSL, TLS, or even access storage or something else, or even to initialize your application. You can have multiple containers or processes running on this pod. And if you want to expose your application once that's running on those pods, the replica sets managing the instance count. Let's say you have 5 instances of your application, of your front end. You need a load balancer. You need to spread the traffic between those 5 replicas. And that's where the service come in place. It's kind of a load balancer. Could be an internal load balancer on Kubernetes, or could be completely offloaded to like what we call ingress controllers, but it is a load balancer to direct the traffic to those pods when you have multiple replicas of your application. And then if you want volumes, persistence volumes on that, you can attach Azure Disk, you can attach Azure Files, blob storage, and so on. I'm not going details on all those things today, like ingress controller, secrets, configuration for your application. In production, I'm going to show stateful sets, where that's a way to have a full, stateful volume. That's very good for database. And my application, I have some kind of stateful storage there as well. And I'm going to show why my application is using very soon. But so we have to talk with this API server, and we need to create this local cluster to get started. Okay. But before we get started, I just get a quick, Marcel, recap. I know that you probably have sessions here on, Code Night on .NET Aspire, and some people never, really spend time to learn .NET Aspire. But I think I have these main features or components. .NET Aspire itself is not something new on .NET. It is a new kind of, we are combining things and create kind of a framework that's helping you to develop, cloud native applications locally. And .NET Aspire is for local development pretty much. Okay, most of the things that we're using here are for local development. But some of those main features like smart defaults, yes, you can use in production. Even things like service discovery. Some people are using this developer dashboard also in production, but it's not done for production. It's not really recommended for production, but how that works. The main issue with .NET applications in the past was, remember, Marcel, we have like front end and have multiple microservices, and each one of those APIs or microservices run a different port number, and start becoming very complex for like 5 developers in a team. Each one, when they get the application, the port number starts changing, and each one has a different environment. And with service discovery now, and that smart defaults be able to do all that configuration for that service discovery orchestration. A lot of these things here is done by the smart defaults. It's so easy now to just make the thing works without having care about port numbers and other things. And we can have a look on the code and discuss some of those things. But there are .NET Aspire entry-level sessions where you can learn more about what's available on that smart defaults, on that service discovery, and it's pretty much giving a name the same way that Docker used to do it. And why we talk about orchestration here? We talk about orchestration because if you use like Docker Compose before, that's pretty much what .NET Aspire is doing on that orchestration. They built in .NET Compose, like Docker Compose to .NET as a native feature on .NET. Means that now we can use C# code to define your YAML, like your Docker Compose file. It's pretty much defining all the components of your application in .NET, in C#, and that will be used to orchestrate, to bootstrap, not just bootstrap, but start up your application with all the components that you need for development. Could be your front end, multiple microservices. They're going to have this dashboard to facilitate you have a look on metrics, logs, all the telemetry that you have now with Open Telemetry. That's one of the main things that we set on that smart defaults is Open Telemetry. And that's really game changer now, because we can send all the .NET telemetry, not just from the server, but from the .NET core itself, from the runtime, from the application. You get metrics from all different places of your application, and you're going to be able to use this developer dashboard for in development itself, not in production. You can learn all those metrics and make sure the application is performing, and before even you go to production, you move your application to, you commit your code, you do anything, you'll be able to do this locally if you want. But they create something called integrations that if you watched this session a few months ago, they used to call components. They renamed that to integrations, Marcel, to be more, flexible and for people to understand more. And integrations are, how can I bring Redis cache? How can I bring a database? How can I bring components or integrations for my application without much knowledge? I just want to use a database or a Redis cache or something, and that integration is going to give you that. Or that smart defaults as well, or that configuration that you needed for development. So very simple, you can say, I want a Redis cache, they're going to give you that. Makes sense so far, Marcel? Any question? Or
No, well, like for local development, the experience has been improved, right? And with the latest release towards, like you said, like those integration components, like they're even like the open source, like there are like toolkits now, like to enable different providers, right? Because like before, you would get things to work like let's say default containers, but now things have like with these integrations kind of smooth things up a little bit more. So things are getting easier, better for us developers. Yeah.
Yeah, and it gets closer to what's happening in production, like with service discovery, because like Docker and Kubernetes, you have service discovery there inside the cluster when you go to production. But we never had service discovery natively there, and with that, smart default doing all the configuration for us. And now we have it. That means that not now everything that's running locally probably be running, nicely in production as well, because there's less configuration to be done, less change. That's massive falls if they can define health checks as well. That's very important for Kubernetes to know if the application is running, if it's health. So there are a lot of configurations that can be done there, and they do all that out of the box for us. Now let's move on. Let's see. I'm going to use this GitHub. GitHub Jorge Arteiro, my name, the move dash store. If you clone that repository, we're going to use this code, to go through my demo there. But before we get started, the same way that we talk about the Azure Task Channel, if you're not following, there is a community created by the Azure Kubernetes Service team called the AKS community. I also publish videos there, and please, subscribe to the channel, and we have a Twitter account on that as well. But follow us on the social medias, and there is a lot of content being created by the Azure Kubernetes Service. The sessions from last week from the Azure Day, they also published there already. If you want to see what happened at KubeCon Azure pre-day at KubeCon last week, we have a couple of videos that was published already there. So please subscribe there. But let's get started. .NET 9, if you haven't downloaded, please download .NET 9. And don't think, I'm going to wait for .NET 10 because I only use, even versions. No, trust me, you want to use .NET 9. There are so many improvements there that there is no way to avoid .NET 9, to be honest. We have to go through that. And but let me go through my code here. And I'm going to introduce the application that I created. That's the move store. Let me show the move store here. If you clone that repository, okay, I'm going to create more instructions later, but there is instructions.txt file here that I'm going to show some, commands that I'm using here today. But the application is pretty much a front end. That's a Blazor application running on my Azure domain, movestore.azure.com. Don't expect that to be running forever, but what I'm trying to show here is how can we cache streaming, like in my case, movies. This one here, when I click, and every time that you go for like an advanced part, you don't download the whole movie. Like you just download, the next chunk of the movie, and also on this moves tab here, every time that you click, I'm using the same, video because I don't want to download just on my demo. But the idea is every time that you click, there's a new video being downloaded and being cached inside Kubernetes. Okay, inside the application, you'll be not inside like on the disk of the application, but to be a volume that's mounted on your pod with all those collection of movies. Then the performance will be better. You don't have to be downloading this from blob storage all the time. You just download the first time, we store these in a volume, and that volume is mounted on all the replicas of your application. Means that if there is a load balancer, all the bash, all the replicas, all the copies, all the instance, they're going to have the same caching storage there. And in my case, um, in production, I'm using Azure Container Storage. That's specifically to run on Azure Kubernetes Service. Locally, I'm just using the local storage. I'm not really attaching anything for development. But when you go to production, we're going to have this complete isolated caching file system mounted on your instance of your application, and the performance will be better. You don't be downloading, from the storage all the time. You'll be always a local ephemeral disk mounted on your container, on your pod there, on the application. And then you're going to see that. And the application consists of the backends, the API service azure.com movies. You can download the version 1. And also you can do stream, let's say 4. Then you're going to download, it will be downloaded Dark Knight MP4. At the moment, I'm just renaming, but it's all the same file, the same movie, just because I don't want to, in development, for a demo, have too many files. But yeah, I'm able to download and use the API on this way here. And then how that works locally, how can I get this application that's running here nicely on Azure Kubernetes Service? And I'm going to show it then exactly how I moved to production, how I got here on my Azure Kubernetes Service, and I have my front end, and even I have myself the Aspire dashboard running here as well. Okay,
That's
it's
cool.
just to prove that I'm using a UI. By the way, this UI is from Microsoft. It's called Headlamp. You can download on headlamp.dev. If you install that, it's a desktop application. You can have on Mac, you can have on Windows. I'm on Windows here. And then in this case, I'm running my things on this. In production, I'm running here on this cluster. I go on workloads, pods. I can filter by my namespace, move store. And because I'm not exposing the dashboard publicly, I can use Headlamp to do what I call a port forward. I go inside my dashboard. I can do a port forward here. And I can open the link now for my .NET Aspire dashboard running on Azure Kubernetes Service. A lot of people I know that are doing that with Azure Container Apps. You can do on Azure Kubernetes Service as well. And now I have the front end, the back end. You can get all the logs, warnings, all the the beautiful things that we have. We don't have the logs because that's the way that runs on Kubernetes. I'm going to give the logs here. Then have to get the logs through Kubernetes. But you can have the metrics, trace, everything will be working also in production. How I get that? Let's start from the local development thing to understand how that works. So I'm going to be using Windows Subsystem for Linux. I just cloned my code here. I have my source code. And I'm going to use Visual Studio Code, not full Visual Studio. So I have Visual Studio Code with my application open. As you can see, I have instructions file. And the first thing I do is I don't have clusters created yet. I want to create this local cluster. So to create a kind cluster is to create like a whole cluster inside one single container. So to create containers, I need Docker Desktop here on Windows. I have my Docker Desktop running. I'm going to stop that. I don't want to use this one that I have already running. I'm going to stop this one. But I want to create a kind cluster like this one. And there's one thing that was I want to expose some ports that running on this specific container because I want to be able to, from my local development myself, be accessing ports running inside this container, inside this cluster, that pretty much a single container. And how we do that? How we simplify our development to make sure that we don't have to be mapping ports or doing port forwards or something. Let me open, I think that's inside my app host. I create two files inside, my .NET Aspire project. Before we show how to get the classes, for you to understand what's a .NET Aspire, I just create a .NET Aspire 9. As a full, like a normal template that you create with front end and back end. And then I create my move store on that. And then the project is a front end web application. We have the API servers. And we have the service defaults from .NET Aspire that do all the configuration for .NET Aspire. Then some people asking what kind of configuration that's being done, like OpenTelemetry, service discovery here, health checks, OpenTelemetry. And then you can customize all that configuration for OpenTelemetry, for health checks on those smart defaults. Let's see if you want to create a health check, a live check, all those things can be used here. That's the normal you can learn when you start learning .NET Aspire. And then the main project for .NET Aspire orchestration is called app host. And that's the file where on this program.cs, that's where we find, how's the font there? The size good?
That's good. Yeah.
It's good?
Yeah.
Yes,
Even
maybe too
better.
much.
But
Even
that's
better. Let's put
great.
a
Like
little bit.
we can see it.
Let's make sure that one can see it. And that's what we call the orchestrator for .NET Aspire. We do, and that app host project is the one that startups. It's like a Docker Compose app when you do .NET Run here with this project. If you start your application, your solution on this app host project using this file here, that configuration, they're going to start all those components for you. That will be the API, in my case, and also the front end. That's what we call .NET Aspire Orchestrator. And now .NET 9 brings so many new features. You could put Red's cache here, you could put a database, all those integrations that we talk about. That's toolkit that was created .NET 9 as well, that community toolkit. There are a lot of things that can be used here to expand that. So that's a very simple configuration I'm using here, just for a single front end and API. But if I go on the what's new in .NET 9, you're going to see so many new features that can be done. Let me just scroll here to show one that we can.
There are lots.
There are lots of things here. I think that's sorry, that's not .NET. That's not .NET 9, but yeah, let's say quick starts and what's new in .NET Aspire 9. If you go on this one, there are a lot of new features. Okay, the first one is you don't need .NET workloads to be installed anymore. Now it's like native, just using .NET and NuGet package. Then simplifies a lot. Then you have to install our workloads to work with .NET Aspire anymore. There are new templates for .NET 9. And by the way, .NET Aspire 9 works on .NET Runtime 8 as well.
8.
It's kind of confusing, but yeah, that's how that works. But for example, let's go on this one here. Now I have all for the API to wait for the message queue, in this case, Robert message queue, and then you have a wait. You only start the API when the that helps a lot. It's pretty much, Docker Compose with in C# now, with all the features that we used to have on .NET Compose, on Docker Compose, you can now have on here as well. That waiting is very important. Another one, the health checks, you can do with health checks, means they're going to be waiting for that health check to be true, for them to say, okay, the API is running and go for the next one. Okay, that's also very important with health checks, because we make sure that they wait for the components to be ready to start the next one or to make the application available for us. Now you can see if the application is healthy on the dashboard as well. You can add delays. You can even do like the health checks. Add the health checks here. That's a nice way to do the health checks. And that's on that app host project that I was showing for you before. Is that on my code here? That's all done on this file here. Okay, and then what more I can? This new feature is persistent container. Means that we don't want to be restarting all those components all the time, Marcel. And sometimes, if you have to stop your app host and you have to change something and restart it, takes a long time, because you have to make sure all those components are running. And now you can say with lifetime, and because Red Message Queue runs as a Docker container, we run it as a container here. When you start this, they now say, don't stop the container, keep that running. Then it'll be a lifetime. And also don't lose all the messages that are on the queue and all those things. And that's very important feature, very, very important. And now you can do that thing. You can see on the dashboard, that's a pin there. That's kind of, persistent way to keep that running. What is that?
No, yeah, because like in general, during development, you're stopping things, but
yeah,
you don't want to stop like the Redis, right? You just want to keep whatever messages, whatever you put in there, just let it go, but you just want like to get the web and the API restarted. So it's a pretty good way of handling. Yeah, things like that, like make things simpler for us developers.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's how those things works. There's so many new features now. You can create like events on development on your dashboard. You can create buttons on your dashboard there. Yeah, so many new OpenAI preview, MongoDB, and so on. Azure provisioning. Wow, I even haven't looked at everything myself yet. The community and the .NET teams working so hard on that. And Entra ID integration. Azure Functions was a big announcement as well. Azure Functions. I think you can use some. There's another one that I like. You can see that's just one. That's just the news from .NET Aspire. Like blob storage. Yeah. You can use Event Hub and things. Well, means that you can have these, emulators running locally. You can do all these things locally now.
Everything that can be containerized, you can have on .NET Aspire, right?
Yeah. And going back for our application, if I want to run this locally, I have to go in my debugging, okay? And I have to go app host, and I start this app host project. Let's try here locally. You can do it on full Visual Studio as well. Just run your app host application. And that's how we do development on on .NET file. We run that host project, and looks like, let's see what's happening here. Maybe it didn't work. Maybe I broke something here on my on my local environment, but that's going to work in production, and I can show for you how that works. Okay, now, don't worry. Let's follow the local developer with Kubernetes, and I can show you how that works. I don't want to fix that right now, okay? But let me create the cluster, and I'm going to show that running on Kubernetes, because that's the main goal here for us. Then to create this cluster, I need those configurations that I have here, and I have a file called that I use for .NET Conf. To create a kind cluster, I just want to make sure that I open those port numbers for each one of my application components. Then I want to make sure that we're going to use port 8091 on my local host, and it'll be mapped with a port on my cluster on this port number. Because Kubernetes, they normally, they use like a range of node ports on the cluster, and normally is on that 32,000 range there. Then I'm going to do all this mapping on those ports for us to be able to work with these local port numbers on my local development, okay? Then we need that configuration file. I'm going to use this one because that's the one I have in my configuration. And I'm going to call this cluster, I rename it here to be Coordinate New Zealand, okay? And then that's the command line that you have to install. By the way, you have to install this kind command line. Okay, I can show you later how to do it, but you go here, and I have to make sure that I'm talking, when you do kind, they're going to use Docker, then I have to make sure Docker is running, okay? And I'm going to do this using this configuration file that I just showed for you. Okay. I have to go on the move. What's it called? I have to be inside the movie store. It's called app host. Let's run the same command now inside this folder. And then Kai is going to create now this cluster for us, because I have the container image in cache on my local environment already. It'll be a little bit faster. They're already starting the control plane. You can see here. And also you can see the port number that you mapped. Now all my local ports, 8091 to 94, will be mapped inside my my cluster that runs inside that container on those port numbers. Then that's it. It was fast because I had this in the Docker image in cache to create my cluster. Then the way to check, you use kubectl command line, and you say get nodes. There you go. We have a Kubernetes cluster now running with a single node. Then the first thing I do, following my instructions here is I always make sure that I get on my, because I'm using Windows Subsystem for Linux on my Visual Studio Code. You can see here WSL. And that's where my .cube config are. All my configuration to connect that cluster is inside this file here. Your WSL distro and the .NET cube. And if I go on my headlamp where I manage my cluster, then I'm gonna load like a new cluster. I can choose this file. There you go. That's the file that I already showed for you. And I can load this configuration. and just select the cluster. I don't want to load everything again. The only cluster that I want is the code 91. Okay, you can unselect and get the cluster that you just created. And they're going to bring that cluster very soon here for you. Just loading. Like that. There you go, code ignite, cluster is running. Now from my IDE, from the headland, you can have full access to your cluster, have the nodes, you have the workloads, and I don't have anything because I don't have the move store namespace. We're going to create that. Okay, I have a clean cluster running here. I have access from my headland, accessing my kubeconfig, because when we create the cluster, they update all the configuration to connect the kind cluster on this .kubeconfig file. Okay, then what we did, we create the cluster using the configuration. But to deploy on Kubernetes, we need what we call the YAML files from Kubernetes. And for that, we're going to use this tool called Aspirate. You have to install as well. There's an installation as a global tool. You can use this command to install. And then you do like some commands. And the first one is aspirate init, initialize that. I'm going to try to avoid, I think it's too much detail. You can watch the video from last week, Marcel, where, you can see how that works. But
Yep.
the way that I do is, you see, when you run init, initialize, then you generate the files that you needed, okay? When you do init, they kind of create, you have to do this init normally inside the app host folder, the move store app host, like I'm here, app host. Then you run aspirate init, and then they're going to run something and ask you, do you want to overwrite the existing configuration? I'm going to say no. So then if you want to do it, you can do it. They're going to ask you questions. And it's very simple at this stage. You can see the video from last week, but you have to initialize. And also you have to now generate the files, okay? What do you think? Should I do it again? Let's do again.
Well, if
Let's do
you're not
again quickly.
gonna break your demo, up to you.
I don't think it's going to break my demo, but let's do again. The first thing they ask, if you want to, configure like container registry. In my demo, I'm not doing. I could, do configuration for Azure Container Registry or Docker Hub. I'm not going to do it. Then they ask if you want to have a prefix for the repository name. Like Docker Container in Registry normally have like a prefix. In my case, I'm going to do it, yes. And I'm going to put like my name. Then all the container image will be my name / frontend API, like that. And they also ask if you want to have templates that you can customize the way that they generate the files. In my case, I'm not going to do templates. That's it. That's a very simple way. Then they create this aspirate.json file. Okay, aspirate.json file is this one here. That's simple, very simple. That's just for the tool. And now, follow the instructions. You have to do the aspirate generate. To not overwrite and lose what I did before, what I'm going to do, I'm going to change the folder. And I will just say, just create on that folder aspirate output 1. Okay. And let's do again. I want to reprompt it. The default generation for aspirate tool is using customized templates. Okay, you can use Helm charts if you want, but I'm going to use customize. And they ask you for a password. I use my name, could be anything. That password is just for the tooling to encrypt some things, like secrets. If you have secrets on your application, then could be anything. That's just be used by the tooling locally. And then they're going to generate the manifests. And what they do after generate the manifest, they're going to build the Docker image. They're going to use .NET Publish to build the container image. By the way, you can follow the build here if you go on Docker image. You're going to see like something in build as well. In this case, they're not using Docker build. That's why I cannot see here, but you're going to see the image being created, or he created here. Let's see how that's going to work. Take some time because they're not using Docker build. You could use Docker build. Now it's .NET 8, .NET 9. You can just use .NET Publish to create container image. And day building, there's a little bit CPU here because we have StreamYard running, and all the stream is going to take a little bit longer. But they rebuilding those container image that they have here. You see, I have the prefix with my name, and have web frontend and API server. And they're going to rebuild those container image. And the only thing they ask at the end, if you want to create a high level, I can even stop it. We don't want to, really he create at the moment, but that's how you generate the files. And once you have that, in my case, I'm storing my image on Docker Hub, because remember, when you go to production, the cluster on Azure Kubernetes Service, they have to have access to the container image. And the way that I did on my demo, I'm using my Docker Hub here, Jorge Arteiro, and I have the web frontend API server, okay, deployed here. That's where the image is. You can push that for the Azure Container Registry or someplace that you wanna, Or you can also just use the kind command line tool to load the image inside your kind cluster. That's how, way you put the name of the cluster here. In our case, would be this new coding light name, and you load the image inside the cluster, okay? I'm going to use the public ones, but if you're doing development, you can do this load to load the image without being published anywhere yet. Just loading the image like this. Then the way that works after that is you have to apply those generated files that you're going to look now on your Kubernetes cluster. But let's have a look on the files that we created before. So we have this tool. Like in our case, I'm using this aspect output. That's the default folder that they create. And they create all those, components. Let me just give a second here. Yeah, the first file they create is like a manifest file to create your namespace. They create a high-level customization, that's the customized template, where they tell you everything they're going to use. In our case, all the files and the folders that they're going to be using to deploy. We're going to deploy the dashboard as well, the Aspire dashboard, and the API and front end. So deployment file, service names, and the change that I made, Marcel, was, that's very important. The default they use client IP here, cluster IP, and I changed to be node port. And I also mapped the port numbers. They use node ports. This way you can work locally. Remember that I opened the port numbers, 32701. That's exactly how that works. Yeah. Then my traffic now is going to this port for the front end, and for the back end, 702. And if you go on the dashboard, also the same 704, that 03 for the open telemetry and for the dashboard. That's the way that now have access to the container Kubernetes. Then if we go back to instructions and we say, I'm going to use kubectl to apply that, okay? And then I'm going to use this folder that I normally use for my local development. I made some changes, is the dev one here. It's pretty much the same that I just showed for you, okay? But the only difference is that, because if you look at the configuration here, see the port numbers that I mapped, and that's the, let's check here the port numbers that I use. Yeah. Then that's the one that I'm going to use to deploy. That's all on GitHub, by the way. And you can just copy this command to create or delete. That's my dev cluster. I have one for each one of my configurations, like the local cluster, the AKS cluster. I'm going to use the dev one. And I'm going to run this command, okay? I have access to my kind cluster from kubectl. And then I'm going to apply that. That's it. That was that fast. I have my headlamp. I can just now probably see the move store. Yeah, move store. The container being created. You're not going to see the container here, okay? You're not going to see the container because they run inside that kind cluster. You're not going to be able to see the container. It's all running inside a single container.
That's cool.
And then let's wait. Some container not running. Let's have a look if my configuration is right. Sometimes I move. So I'm using this one here. Let's check the deployment. Yeah, I'm using Jorge Arteiro Web Frontend. There we go. Now frontend's running. Not sure exactly what happened with that. The back end. Let's wait a little bit. Let's check the API service. I use this one here, deployment. API service latest. I was pull the image and service 32702. You can always check 32702 if you map in the port number correctly. Yes, I am. Yeah, there you go. It's running now. It just takes some time to download the image from the internet. The first time, the second time will be very fast. There you go. Everything's running now. And now, how can I debug that? You know, like remember that we mapped the ports. Then 701. If I open, that's my front end. 702 is the API. I have to go movies. There we go. It's running. It's all running now locally on my kind cluster. Just make sure that, yeah, movie is working, not the page. There you go. Everything's working. API is working. The only thing that I don't have access, yeah, I do have access. 703 will be my dashboard. Voila, have everything run locally now. And 704, remember that's your open telemetry. Means that if you want to send anything for this dashboard, you can use that port 8094 on your local environment to send anything for this dashboard here. Okay, and another thing is that's persistent now because until you delete, this pod here, they'll be persistent. All the dashboard information will be there. And now you're running locally. And how can we debug? To debug, you go back to new application. You have to install this tool called mirrord, this extension. That's a project. Okay, install extension from MetalWare. you're going to learn about mirrord here, mirrord.dev, and how that tool works. They're going to, it can steal the traffic from your cluster to your local environment, or you can mirror the traffic. And then for that, after installation, you can see at the bottom, where is that mirrord? Should be here. Let me just, oh my gosh. Yeah, so I had to minimize a little bit, but you normally have here on the border here on the VS Code, you can enable. Let's say I'm going to enable mirrord. Just having a click here, you enable. Is enable now. And you can select the configuration file that you want. I'm going to use that web. Let's debug the API first. Okay, I want to debug the API. That'll be the API. And once that, let me go back here. That's the configuration file I did, like for the API server. The way that I do is I normally get the pod number, name, let's say the API service, the name is that. That's the API pod that I want to debug, and I just change the name here. Has to be pod slash. And in my case, I want to steal the traffic. You can mirror, okay, or you can steal. Steal means when I ask the front end and the front end calls the API, they're going to redirect the traffic to be running on my local debug environment. And mirror means just send me a copy of the, of the call. Don't break the application. The application will be still working on Kubernetes, but send me just like a, like a copy of the call, like a mirror. You mirror the call, you duplicate the call. It's very nice.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
Then I'm going to steal just for you to see that it stops everything. But you can use both. And if you want to learn more about this configuration file, I do recommend you to go for that configuration options. And nice thing, you can see what's available on the open source version and what's available on the paid version. And as you can see, most of the features are available on the open source version. And you can see the open source version on GitHub here as well. Okay. Then there are options to configure DNS, storage, message queue, database, a lot of things here. I'm not going all that detail. I'm going to do a simple, debugging still in the traffic. I'm going to enable file system to be enabled to write there as well. Okay. And environment variables as well, all these things. But namespace is important. What namespace your application is running there, move store. And what I do, when I enable, I want to debug the API, remember? Let me just go here on the API. And there is a launch settings. Yeah, my launch set is, very simple. You can check the launch settings after, but let me just debug. Because I did set, on my configuration the pod number. Oh my gosh, something that was breaking before. That's not my concern. Let me, before that, do one thing here. Solution Explorer. Hang on here a second. Let's see if this helps. SDK, so it's probably the same error that I got on the last one. Oh my gosh. Hang on. Let's try the. You can see from my video last week that I debugged front end and back end at the same time, by the way. If you want to see front end and back end being debugged at the same time, you can do it. Let's try to at least get the bug working here.
Yeah, sometimes just
That's the problem when you
restarting the
have too
Visual
many.
Studio works. Visual Studio Code. Let's
Yeah,
see.
let me just get API. Yeah. And before I enable, just I have to enable that first. Now going to work because yeah, live. Looks better than before.
Yeah, some sort of conflict. Yeah, but now it's working.
Looks better. Yeah, looks like it's working this way, but let's stop. Let me try the, yeah, that's it. Store web. Let's enable again here. Okay, I'm enable mirrord. I'm going to select the API. Remember, I'm going to access the version that's running on my cluster, not the local version, to debug. And that's nice when someone's working on the front end. You are the only one working on the back end. You could have this cluster running on AKS and just debugging your API on your local environment, but everything else is running in a centralized cluster. This kind of cluster in your company, if you have 5 developers, could be deployed, in a kind cluster running somewhere on your private network or even on the internet on AKS. But let me go back and try to debug with double check here the mirrord file, the API server. That's that's the same file that we want to debug. And then with mirrord enable. Yeah, I had Docker desktop being updated just before the session. I had to restart everything because Docker desktop was automatically updated. Looks like, yeah, we are in debug mode now. Just make sure that the movies, let's see if we can, hang on. Let's go my API code. And this API is a single API, it's like a simple API. Let's put a breakpoint when you try to download something, okay? Yeah, breakpoint's working. And we go on the port, the front end that's working locally, 891, and you click here. There you go. Breakpoint was triggered. And now you can debug, here on this way. And that's pretty much that. It's very simple, to steal the traffic. In this case, remember it's the streaming. They're going to be calling the stream multiple times. I have to remove this, otherwise it'll be, calling multiple times. Because if I go here on the video, they're going to, call the debug again and again. And the same thing you can do, like one thing I like to do is like I go here, duplicate workspace. You duplicate file, duplicate workspace. And then you can, if you're not debug like the front end, you can do exactly the same thing. You can go on there, you can get the name of the front end running, that's be that web front end. Or just forget, I'm going to show without getting the name there to simplify. If you remove this, thing here, then I have to remember that I have to enable mirrord. Let's just let load a little bit here. Here you go. Yeah, never try with the other one running, but let's see if it works. There you go. I enable mirrord, and I also select the configuration to be web. And I do still, and I don't select the pod name. What's happening if I do that? When you do debug, now I'm going to debug the front end. Because I haven't told the pod name, they're going to ask you for the pod name. Then you go web front end. And now I have the web front end running. But remember, you have to go for the one that's published on Kubernetes. That's the front end here. And you have to click. That's now, this thing's running locally. That's why it kind of maybe took some time. But let's put a breakpoint now on the front end, okay? Let's go on the front end, web application, and let's get, components, page. Let's go movies. Have the code here. Every time that you want to watch a movie, and let's go back on my page, go in movies. Sorry, CSS crash, but when I click here, watch, there you go. You can see the Visual Studio Code is popping, and now debugging front end.
Yeah.
And look at this. I'm going to call this API. And if I go back on my API and I put a breakpoint also up again on the API, and I play that, now we go for the backend API. Then you can debug front end and back end at the same time, stealing or just mirroring the code, the traffic. That's a game changer. I don't think
Yeah.
nobody can do this way, and that's why I'm using mirrord. And I talked with the team there at KubeCon last week, and we're going to bring more documentation to use that on Azure Kubernetes Service as well. And if you want to learn more about mirrord, I did a video with them on Azure TAR. There is a video explaining more about mirrord. He's also doing like a debugging using Node.js application. And that video from .NET Conf last week, that's the one that you can watch and get more information. But the bonus at the end for us to finish, Marcel, I don't go too long, is how we now go to production. Okay? The only difference to go here for that Kubernetes production is what it is. If I stop all this debugging, you can do the same thing on AKS, by the way. If I connect on my AKS cluster, I can do the same debug I did that on the cluster running on Azure. That's the amazing thing.
That's good.
Yeah. But if you go there to host and you look the AKS, those are the chains I made on my YAML files to be able to run on AKS. Pretty much was I'm creating like a load balancer for my front end. And I also create, in my case, I create a load balancer for the back end, but you don't need it. It could be, internal, but I create a load balancer. That's why I have access externally for both. And in my case, I use a stateful set and not a deployment for the API service because I'm mounting volumes here. I'm doing a volume claim, and I'm using Azure Container Storage to mount a ephemeral disk. And remember that my application is caching things on this folder app files. They're getting like a full volume and they're mounting on that folder app files. And I mount these on each one of my stateful sets. Um, and because I'm using Azure Container Storage replicas, we can get this caching on all the instances of my API. And that's the game changer, that you can have these caches being replicated on those replicas. Even if the pod dies, um, like if you wanted the same copy, you could use Azure Files, for example, where you can mount read write many. In this case, the first time that's written on that volume will be there until the cluster, stops or dies, because they spread copies of the volume across all the like 3 nodes of the cluster, or 5 nodes you define. And if you want to learn more about this, how I did the container storage, there is also another video on the AKS community channel. There is a video I did it, how to use container storage on GitHub Actions. And that video you can learn all about storage. There is a nice repository as well that you can learn. That's on my GitHub here. Let me just show quickly. It's called this one here or this one here. Those two. Azure Files Actions AKS, or if you want to container storage, you can learn how to use storage on AKS. That's a very detailed video that I did. But in production, that's what I do. And then you apply the same way that we applied before the instructions here. You're just going to apply to a different cluster, pretty much the files that you have on those configuration files. In my case, what is that? Sorry, it'll be the AKS output here. Makes sense, Marcel. It's a lot of details there, but make sure now that you can debug on AKS, you can debug in production even if you want, because think about that. If you just mirror the traffic, it's not going to crash anything in your application. It's just going to send the traffic there. That's not going to break your main application. Understand?
Yeah.
If there are 5 developers working on a centralized cluster and they're just debugging one single microservice, but everything else is running on that cluster, you don't need everything running locally. Understand? You can just have your local API or microservice debugging, and everything else is running on that cluster. Yeah, I think we could in a future, bring more details on how to do that once we learn more about mirrord and how to go in more details, more advanced use case. But that's what I have so far, and then it's a
Yeah.
lot of
Wow.
information already.
Love it. Like mirror
Yeah,
D.
make
I
sure
think
that
that's
you follow the
the
next
next
steps
tool
if you want.
to
Yeah, like
explore. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Thanks for coming and share, George.
no
I think
problem,
like
my pleasure. Let me know if you have questions in the future. Send me a message, and happy to
yeah,
come back another day to go in more details as well. Now that .NET Aspire is becoming a very interesting project, and everybody should be using .NET Aspire in development, to be honest. It's not
yeah.
going to
Well,
change your application at all. It's
yeah. The
not
the
going
only
to
thing is
change
that
the
like
way
it,
that you deploy in production. You can use that in
yeah,
development for your benefit.
yeah. More and more features, right, are being brought like to .NET Aspire. Um, yeah, these layers improvements just made our life like so much easier. Now, like you bring like this experience within Kubernetes, well, for sure, people are going to be very interested, like in exploring more and more, right? Because uh, uh, what you used to have like those challenges, like in debugging those containers within the pod. Like now you have that with mirrord. That's awesome. Yeah, we got like a question here, like around the slides. I don't know if that's something you can share, but if you cannot share, like if the links are available, right? Because you show like the
And the
big screen.
code's there. The slides I haven't shared, but good point. I can share and leave a message on the meetup channel there. Let me share on my slide deck. Normally I put my things on slide share,
Uh-huh.
and if you look Jorge Arteiro on slide share, that's where my slides are. I'm going to upload there as well.
All right. Yeah, Dimitri just asked that one. Oh, that's awesome. We don't have like any other questions, but it feels that like there's a lot of content for people to explore. You put like a lot of links around like the Azure Tar, the AKS community on YouTube as well. Oh, that was pretty good. And I'd like just to thank you for your time because you're very busy. You're always
My
in
pleasure. My pleasure.
conferences. Yeah, it's a pleasure having you here like with us. And yeah, any last thoughts or
No, I
comments?
think it should be, .NET now should be looking very carefully on .NET Aspire. Follow those channels, the Azure the AKS community that we're going to try to bring more content. The .NET channel also from .NET Conf last week. There are a lot of content should be,
Yeah,
selecting some to watch on that space. And yeah, let's keep in touch and come back here some stage. And if you're watching Marcel yourself and someone watching, you're also welcome on the Azure channel. If you want to share anything, just ping me. We can book a time and record.
it's pretty
You
good.
know?
Yeah. Thank you again, George. For the community, this is going to be our last session of the year. I know, like
Yeah,
we're by November. This December, I'm just taking like a break, just to do like some studies, and then like we're back in Jan next year. We have a lot of contents, really. In Jan, like we're doing like every 3 to 4 weeks. I think we're gonna have like short periods because wow, there are lots that are going to happen, and other guests coming like to the user group as well, which is great, right? So I always invite people. If people are just so open to come and share, like you, George. It's always a pleasure, really. And thank you very much,
thank you so
George,
much.
to the audience. And yeah, catch you guys next year. And talk to you guys soon.
Enjoy Christmas and New Year or whatever you want to celebrate.
Yeah,
Take some time off as well and come back next year stronger.
yeah.
Let's
Happy
do next
holidays.
year Azure Day, to bring this Azure community, so many people that recorded. Let's do like Azure Day and,
That
and,
would be
and bring
great. Yeah,
speakers
awesome.
or new speakers. And let's do that next year for sure.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Uh, Cheers. Bye.